The blast door buckled inward, white-hot metal spraying across the bunker floor like molten rain. Jonas Thorne didn't flinch. He adjusted the strap of his modified kinetic rifle, his shoulder pressing firmly against Commander Vera Cress's back. He could feel the rapid cadence of her heartbeat through her armor, a rhythm that matched the adrenaline thrumming in his own veins. This wasn't just a fight, it was a defiance of physics and fate. Teach the gods to fear the ants. That was the philosophy Jonas lived by. Vera checked the charge on her wrist-mounted energy blade, her breath hitching as another explosion rocked the foundation. The elite silencer units outside were arguably the deadliest force the Galactic Council could deploy, designed to hunt down rogue elements with surgical precision. But they had made a fatal error. They had cornered a wounded commander and a stubborn scavenger in a trap designed by human ingenuity. We don't build empires, we weaponize what they leave behind. Jonas gripped her hand for a split second, a grounding anchor in the chaos. His callous thumb brushed her knuckle, a silent promise that transferred more strength than any shield generator. "Ready?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. Vera looked up at him, her violet eyes blazing with a mixture of terror and fierce admiration. "Always." The door gave way. 6 hours earlier, the landscape of Cinder Prime had been a different kind of hell. The toxic dunes stretched endlessly, a graveyard of ships where the wastelands don't mourn the dead, they just swallow the evidence. Farah lay half-buried in the shifting crimson sands, her systems failing. The Idle-Guard Imperium had not just discharged her. They had executed a betrayal so absolute it left her gasping for air in an atmosphere that wanted her dead. She was a discard, a loose end snipped by the very hierarchy she had served. Her HUD flashed red warnings, signaling the approach of a Deathworlder storm, but she couldn't move. Her legs were numb, her nanites exhausted. Then came the vibration. Not the wind, but the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots. A figure emerged from the haze, clad in scavenged composite plating that looked more like an exoskeleton than a uniform. Jonas Thorne knelt beside her, his face obscured by a rebreather, but his movements were surprisingly gentle. He scanned her vitals with a wrist comp that looked older than the war itself. "You have an expiration date, but I'm pausing the clock," he muttered, his voice filtered and mechanical. He didn't ask for permission. He scooped her up, his strength shocking her. To the galaxy, humans were often dismissed as reckless primitives, sometimes derisively called Space Orcs by the high-tier species for their durability and brute force. But as Jonas carried her through the rising gale, Vera felt something else, the undeniable burn of the Terran spirit. It wasn't just biology, it was a refusal to yield. He brought her to his bunker, a fortress hidden beneath the wreckage of a crashed dreadnought. It was a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare principles, converted from debris into a sanctuary. As he laid her on a medical gurney, stripping away the damaged segments of her armor to apply a healing gel, the air between them shifted. It wasn't just gratitude. As her vision cleared and she looked at the man saving a stranger who represented the regime that oppressed him, she saw the raw power of humanity. He wasn't saving her for a reward. He was doing it because the concept of an apex predator, hunting the weak, offended his core morality. The console on the wall pinged. A high-frequency signal cut through the static. The silencers had found her tracker. "They are coming," Vera whispered, gripping his wrist. "You need to leave me. They will burn this place to the ground." Jonas looked at the screen, then back at her, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He didn't see a liability. He saw a partner. "Let them come," he said, racking the slide of his weapon. "This is a science fiction story to them. Advanced tech against a primitive scavenger. They're about to learn why you never corner a human on his home turf." The blast wave hit them a fraction of a second before the sound, a concussion of superheated air that threatened to liquefy organs. Jonas didn't stumble. He pivoted, his body becoming a kinetic shield between Vara and the breach. Debris pinged harmlessly off his backplate as 3 silencer units stepped through the smoke. They were towering chrome nightmares, the Galactic Council's answer to dissent, moving with a synchronized elegance that was terrifying to behold. "Get low," Jonas roared, shoving Vara behind a reinforced bulkhead. He didn't fire at the intruders. Instead, he leveled his rifle at the ceiling supports. This was the essence of human ingenuity, thinking laterally when linear force was suicide. He blew the hydraulic locks on the upper vents, unleashing a torrent of pressurized coolant steam into the room. The sleek, optical sensors of the silencers blinded instantly in the whiteout conditions. Vera watched him move through the fog, a blur of violence and purpose. He was fighting 3 apex killers, yet he moved with the reckless confidence of a death worlder who considered gravity a suggestion rather than a law. He tackled the lead unit, his combat knife finding the one gap in its neck armor. The collision sounded like a shuttle crash, metal screaming against metal. Vera forced herself up. Her legs screamed in protest. But the sight of Jonas fighting for her, fighting for them, ignited a fire in her blood that overrode the pain. She wasn't a damsel. She was a commander. She drew her energy blade, the violet plasma humming as she lunged into the fray. She drove the blade into the knee joint of the second unit just as it raised its weapon toward Jonas. The machine buckled, sparking wildly. Jonas looked back, his eyes meeting hers through the haze. In that split second of violence, the connection between them was electric, a physical tether that held them steady while the world burned. He grinned, a fierce, wild expression. "Now," he shouted. Vera slammed her hand onto the console nearest her. The dormant gravity traps engaged. The room groaned as artificial gravity spiked to 10 times the galactic standard. The silencers, optimized for speed and agility, crumpled under their own weight, their internal servos whining and snapping. Jonas and Vera, braced against the magnetic floor plates Jonas had rigged, stood tall amidst the crushing pressure. "This is asymmetric warfare," Jonas growled, stepping over the pinned leader. "You spent billions on armor. I spent 20 credits on magnets." He didn't kill the leader immediately. He pulled a data cable from his wrist and jammed it into the unit's comms port. "What are you doing?" Vera asked, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the adrenaline began to recede, leaving her trembling. "Information dominance," Jonas replied, tapping a sequence on his gauntlet. "I'm not just beating them. I'm broadcasting their humiliation. Every ship in the fleet above is about to see their invincible hunters crushed by a scavenger and a traitor." The screen above them lit up, showing the feed being beamed directly to the enemy armada. It was a file labeled simply HFY Stories V1. The image of the broken silencers, pinned like insects, was more damaging than any orbital bombardment. It shattered the illusion of invincibility. Moments later, the sky outside the bunker shifted. The contrails of the enemy dropships reversed. The fleet was withdrawing. They couldn't risk the morale collapse of a prolonged engagement against a foe they couldn't terrify. The silence that followed was heavy. But it wasn't empty. It was charged. Jonas turned to her, the fight draining out of him to be replaced by something warmer, more dangerous in its own way. He reached out, his hand cupping the side of her face, his thumb tracing the soot-stained line of her jaw. The heat radiating from him was intoxicating, a stark contrast to the cold metal surrounding them. "We didn't just survive," Vera whispered, leaning into his touch, her eyes searching his. "No," Jonas murmured, lowering his forehead to rest against hers. "We just started a war." Vera closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of ozone and victory. They stood amidst the wreckage, 2 sparks in the dark, ready to burn down the galaxy to build something new.